Also, a word about moderate Muslims. There are plenty of moderate Muslims, of course. Most self-described Muslims actually do tend to ignore the parts of the book that exhort them to barbarism. But there were plenty of moderate Germans in Nazi Germany too, and a fat lot of good they did us. And the fact remains that in both cases, the fanatics were the ones taking the ideologies to their logical conclusions. Now, regardless, if any Muslims, just like any Christian with the Bible, is claiming to believe in the divinity and the sanctity of the Quran, the onus is on them to prove that they are cool with things like equal rights for women and minorities. We aren't to just blithely assume that everyone loves secularism and minority rights until proven otherwise. That's just totally ridiculous. People are not born benevolent, secular, and liberal. That's a result of culture. If you swear allegiance to that fascist book, it is your job to prove that you're okay with modern liberal life. Now, there are exceptions to atheist complacency. Courageous apostates like Ibn Warraq and Ayaan Hirsi Ali lead the way. Dutch atheist leader Geert Wilders has stood steadfast through the most vicious slanders. And popularizers like Sam Harris have made no secret of their disdain toward Islam. But by and large, our organizations, our magazines, our politics are myopically focused on the Christian right. This has to stop. I mean, listen, equal rights for women, gays and lesbians, atheists, secularists and Jews, technology, modernity, trade and commerce, voluntary cooperation rather than rule by an autocrat caliph, sexual freedom rather than sexual shame. These are the hallmarks of our modern liberal society. And these fundamental values stand strong in spite of the Christian right. They are not a fundamental threat. Our brothers and sisters in Iran, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, they have not yet acquired even the fundamentals that we take for granted. Why do we give them, they among us who are the most oppressed by religion, so little of our attention? The Enlightenment and the Industrial Revolution, not so-called Judeo-Christian values, of course, gave us our modern life. Christianity was tamed by the skepticism of the Enlightenment and the materialism of the Industrial Revolution. It was only through unrelenting criticism of the beliefs and mores of the Christians of the time that Christianity was tamed. Thanks to the rational values these long-term revolutions gave us, we now actually live in a strange time. It's a historical anomaly, one in which most Christians befriend Jews rather than set them on fire. But this reality did not just fall out of the sky. It didn't just happen. Islam has to go through this taming process too, and we must help create an atmosphere where more Ayaan Hirsi Alis can come forward, where more Ibn Warraqs can come forward and exhort their countrymen to question Islam as well. And yet we are living instead in a world where a man like Tariq Ramadan can acquire a prestigious professorship at Oxford University. Now, Mr. Ramadan, who asserts that stoning women to death for adultery should be placed under a moratorium. And just this semester, administrators at Penn State University tried to censor the anti-Islamic terrorism work of a student artist because, in the words of the administrators, it did not, quote, promote cultural diversity. They were too afraid that it would be seen as an attack on Islam. Now, diversity of philosophy, art, literature, and music are to be encouraged, but diversity of fundamental values cannot stand. Faith and reason cannot coexist in this way. We cannot compromise between stoning women and electing them senators. We cannot compromise between hanging gays and marrying them. We cannot compromise between censorship and freedom of speech, and we cannot compromise between the Quran and reason. I used to think that we settled this question back in the 1700s, but thanks to today's misguided multiculturalism, we are again at a point where we have to repeat it, and with more force than ever. Religion is not above criticism. And let me be clear, the principle is not Christianity is not above criticism. It's religion is not above criticism. If we atheists care at all about preserving our liberal society, we have no choice but to take a hard stance against Islam, just as the great rational thinkers of the past took that line against Christianity. Christianity is tamed, people. And other cultures know it. It's not gay Israelis who are fleeing to Palestine. Abused wives in the United States are not fleeing to Saudi Arabia. Here in the United States, we are now, thankfully, dealing with peripheral, residual issues. Same-sex marriage, under God and the Pledge of Allegiance. We can argue all day long about these issues, and trust me, I do, but they are absolutely frivolous when compared with the tyranny that Islamic dogma has over its adherents right now, right here, right now, in 2010. We as atheists must be on the front line against that. We must express the utmost confidence in our open society and our secular values. The fate of our civilization, and let me emphasize, too, the lives of Muslims who secretly doubt their faith but are oppressed by religious tyranny, depends upon people like us. This argument is far too important to be left to the Christian right. The Christian right just thinks that Muslims need them some Jesus. That is a disaster waiting to happen. We cannot let the argument against Islam turn into one of faith versus faith. We cannot let this turn into a holy war. We're trying to combat the very idea of holiness. We must be radicals for reason. Reason against faith, reason against Islam, and applied today, reason... Oh, yeah, I jumped ahead. That kind of destroys the force of the sentence so well. Yeah, but that's the key mission, I think, of worldwide non-believers today. It will be a lot harder than speaking out against Christine O'Donnell's views on masturbation, but I think in the final analysis that it will be infinitely more rewarding. Thank you. Okay, questions? I'm sure there are several, and in case anyone's wondering, since I get asked this all the time, no, I'm not Jewish.
I'm just curious what your opinion is on, I think it's Ayaan Hirsi Ali's, I remember I was at the Hitchens thing a while ago, and then someone brought up the question that she promotes that Christians can try to convert their Islamic friends to Christianity because this is like less detrimental for more Christians than Muslims, and I'm curious to know if you what your thoughts are.
I'm very pragmatic. It really is unrealistic to expect most people to be comfortable after having it pounded into them for 30, 40, 50 years by their culture that God exists and he's looking over you. It's better to have them move to a benign form of modern Western Christianity than to be mired in Islamic dogma. Atheism, of course, would be the ideal, I think. Ayaan Hirsi Ali is an atheist, of course. But I do strongly believe that we should always take what we can get.
Didn't you just say in your last line that the answer to the one faith is not more faith? I mean, this is...
Well, that would be, but liberal Christianity would be less faith.
Today we live in a situation where secular values are discarded by most people who nominally describe themselves as Christians. Their secular values take precedence over their religious ones. If the Bible tells them that women can't speak in church, they just kind of sweep it under the rug. That's definitely a move away from faith and toward reason.
Do you believe that the Muslims don't have a right to build the mosque?
They do.
They do, all right.
Something that occurred to me, my personal feeling is a lot of the taming of Christianity came from within. It was just basically part of the evolution of of our society over time that led to the taming of Christianity. Taming of Islam, as much as we would like it, I don't think it's something that can really be done too much through outside pressure. That strikes me as something that would actually create more fundamentalism. What's your opinion on that?
We can help as Westerners by standing strong for our own values and creating the kind of atmosphere that welcomes Ayaan Hirsi Ali or Ibn Warraq rather than branding her as the likes of Ian Baruma might, for example, as a bigot, as someone who wants to tear down other people's lives rather than help them. That has a chilling effect on other potential apostates who might want to speak out and be spokesmen for secularism, for reason, for women's rights. I certainly agree that we can't go in there guns blazing and turn Baghdad into New York City. Fundamentally, it's a Cold War that we should be waging.
So just to clarify, I mean, you've made an interesting criticism, laid it out pretty well. I'm wondering if you're making a cultural argument or a policy argument. Because I think of a lot of right-wing thought as not seeing as much of a problem of having government involvement in the social realm. So, yeah.
Fundamentally, what I'm calling for is something cultural, because the argument that I'm laying out is definitely in the broader culture, still in its infancy, and we should get the dialogue going. We should start arguing out policy around the edges, but we have to be unequivocal about the core.
So you're making it, so it's a cultural argument. How do you see policy fitting into this? Like, why
I need a whole other speech.
Okay. All right.
It could be contended that you can't really act efficiently internationally without getting your own house in order. And I'm wondering, since you seem to be saying we need to act internationally because it's so looming, what your response
Our
would be.
own house is sublimely in order compared to Saudi Arabia's.
So why do we think the biggest arms deal in history to Saudi Arabian regime? How does that support Western values?
Okay,
Tell me that.
Okay, fine. Stop using their oil, and then you can all pay $10 a gallon for oil.
Who's being
You have to be
pragmatic
practical.
now?
Of course, I would like to just go drill up in Alaska, but that's another argument.